harmless water. Why are we running it through a RO machine? Anhydrous. Peace of mind is everything. We've been doing demonstrations on the floor. If you've been down to booth 382, we have been showing Hot Salt Reef. That's our new anhydrous salt. And it's a fundamentally different product because it has no moisture in it. We're going to talk about that, why that's important and why you want no moisture in that salt. Now, usually when I bring up anhydrous salt, a different kind of salt, one of the questions, is I'll say, well, I've been using the same salt for 30 years and I've never had any problems. Everything's okay. And I say, well, I understand that. And sometimes we don't think of things in the context that tells the whole story. For instance, this right here, this is This looks pretty good. If I were to ask you in 1991, what do you think of that brand new Sharp television that you bought with that great picture? A lot of people would say, man, I love it. The color is great, and man, I see all my shows on it. I don't miss any of my shows. It's terrific. But then what if I showed you HD? Would you still have the same answer? You wouldn't have the same answer. You would say, okay, maybe I don't like my television so much because now I have seen something new. So that's what anhydrous salt is. Okay, another situation we run into is we have a new salt and we're excited about it, and then we find out we have the same problem. You have either, I love this salt, I've had it forever, but you also have always chasing the next best salt. And if we had the best salt, why are we still looking for another great salt? Why does the search continue? Well, the search continues because new salt, same problem. And that same problem is moisture content. Today we're not going to talk about parameters of salt. We can talk about that down at the booth. For us, parameters is kind of a remedial expectation. This shouldn't be missed. It doesn't have to be missed. What we're going to talk about is consistency and why we have consistency and why we're able to nail parameters every single time. Hot Salt Reef. You've seen it down there, and I encourage you after this to come on down and see a demonstration if you haven't seen one. I believe we're the only salt that is doing demonstrations today where you can actually see it mix right in front of your eyes. So the word is anhydrous. Anhydrous salt means it's dry. And so it'll be, well, what do you mean? I don't see any water in my salt. Well, you don't see it. This is moisture that's in the molecular compound where most salts, let's just say you have like a magnesium hexahydrate where you'd have magnesium chloride, you have 6 H2O water molecules attached to it. You think that's heavier or lighter than just magnesium chloride? It's heavier. So anhydrous, the first thought is, well, okay, well, you dry the salt out. It's not dried out, okay? What you're seeing here is this is Hot Salt Reef, and that's going into a large tote. It's fine. It's all the same size. We don't have sifting issues with this, and that's part of the quality control. And we'll get to quality control here in a minute. You'll see these are some large totes that have been packaged for a commercial client. You'll see that they're capped and wrapped. This is not the kind of thing that we want to expose to the elements going outside. Once this is packaged and it's sealed, we like for it to be that way until it reaches the end user. Anhydrous raw materials, here again, here's the retail packages of the Hot Salt Reef in buckets and boxes. The anhydrous salt is it's essentially just really wanting moisture. It's so dry that when it comes in contact with moisture, it creates an exothermic reaction. This is one of the signals that you have an anhydrous salt, and whenever I discuss that, the battle of wits has begun. So you dry out your salt. Anybody can dry out the salt. Well, no, the answer isn't that simple. These materials have never had moisture in them ever. And that's what's important. Let's just say it had moisture in it to begin with, and you just dried out a salt. Well, you would just leave behind the contaminants as you vaporize the H2O, just as you would do with salt, right? That's just what happens. You leave it all behind. So it can never have moisture in it, ever, even from the time it's made until the time it reaches the salt. And that's what's going to separate that from a hydrated salt and the contaminants that arrive in that, and we're going to get to that in a second too, contaminants. And we're demonizing moisture today, by the way. I know we're in a hobby where we deal with water, but in this scenario, we don't want it. Another question is, well, if you're mixing out in the open and it absorbs moisture that aggressively, well, then it's no longer anhydrous. Well, in some ways that could be true, but ambient humidity is not the moisture that we're concerned with at all. Ambient humidity, we see a very humid day here. Obviously, we wouldn't want to mix salt in a very humid day. We would want to pick the driest days of the year, and we can make large batches of this, and I'll get to that in a minute as well. But even if it did absorb any of the moisture from the atmosphere, you wouldn't even really be able to detect it. It's so little, and we're talking about such little amounts of moisture, you probably wouldn't even be able to detect it's there, not even through weights and measurements. So with the moisture, what we're really concerned about is where that moisture came from. And this is the issue, okay? This is the root of it. When you're envisioning a hydrated salt, and this salt could carry on average 12 to 14% moisture, maybe even more moisture than that in some. Now, let me give you a visual on that, or just to imagine this. Over a 25 kilo bucket, about 14%, you're looking at close to maybe about 2.8 kilos to maybe 3 kilos. And in weight, you're dealing with maybe 3/4 of a gallon of water. If I were to hold up a jug of 3/4 of a gallon of water and you envision that is what's in these water molecules, that's a lot. And that's taking a lot of space in that bucket. It's making it less efficient. You need a lot more salt to reach salinity than you would an anhydrous salt. Now, this moisture, the water necessarily isn't the concern either. We're already going to be putting it in water, so water's not a problem. It's what's in the water that's a problem. And wherever these materials came from, you're dealing with a water supply of we have no idea where this water came from. This water is not RO water. I think that's the tendency. When you envision moisture, it's just harmless water. If it's just harmless water, why are we running it through a RO machine? It's not just water before we put it in an RO machine, is it? It has to go through the RO process. This moisture in the salt never went through an RO process, so we don't know what's in it. This is an unknown variable, and this unknown variable makes it very hard to reach a target when you're trying to put together a very precise mix. If I were to say 2 + 2 + question mark equals, could you give me an answer? You can't give me an answer because first you need to know what question mark is, right? So we remove the question mark, so we know that 2 + 2 = 4. Where did the water come from? What's the water supply in that region? What are we even dealing with the environmental conditions? These are all unanswered questions that are unacceptable. Quality control. We hear that a lot about quality control with salt. And quality control is important for any product, but most of the quality control that's conducted occurs when the materials are sourced. So if you're sourcing materials that are hydrated, there's no amount of quality control that can fix that. It's already over. You can't take it out once you have that in there. So a lot of the things that must be done with the salt that is hydrated, a lot of it is unnecessary because we know what we're dealing with. When we have no moisture, you kind of have to try to mess that up. It's a lot easier to deal with. So with quality control, we deal with very little quality control, and size doesn't matter. We can make a large batch, we can make a small batch. And the reason is because we don't have those unknown variables, we're not really concerned. We really don't have a risk to take on a large batch. So again, I think when you're dealing with salts that have unknown variables, we get into an aim small, miss small mentality, where we want to take small sizes and make sure that we're okay when we move along. So without the moisture in the salt, this is another thing that we don't have to deal with. So there are a few ways to vet a anhydrous pure salt. The beautiful thing about Hot Salt Reef is you don't have to believe anything that I'm telling you today. You don't have to believe any of it, because you can empirically prove it yourself. I think a lot of times we deal with subjective things when we're talking about salt. Many times I can ask about a salt, well, what do you like about it? A lot of times I can't even get an answer. A lot of times it's unknown. One salt to the next tends to be very much like the one before it. So heat and temperature is the first. We're going to have an exothermic reaction with anhydrous materials. There's no getting around it. Actually, an exothermic reaction verification is one of our quality control measures. So there will be heat involved, and it can be very hot. So with something like hot salt, you never want to take a wet hand and put it in the salt, because that's going to hurt. It is going to hurt, and no matter how many times I try to tell people, just don't try it. So heat, exothermic reaction, it's just wants moisture so badly, you will definitively see this, and it's pretty impressive. However, we can't only go by exothermic temperature, because there are some scenarios whereas you may have a different material that's not used in hot salt, may be used in another formulation, that may take a few more chemical reactions to reach its final destination that could cause some heat, but this has nothing to do with anhydrous or water absorption. 2, this is a big one, weights and measurements, okay? We can use scales to figure this one out. Let's say if you need, let's bring this down. This is where we can aim small and miss small. When we're got the mix done and we want to try each and every, you can do it yourself, and this is where it's wonderful. You could take 1 liter of water, take 35 grams, you make 35 ppt of water. 1 gram for 1 liter is 1 ppt. It's simple. You can measure it all out, and you can be pretty confident you know what you're going to get. Now, for 1 gallon, if I were to say have 145 grams to maybe 149 on average to make 1 gallon at 35 ppt. With hot salt, you're dealing with about 132.5, and that's significantly less. It doesn't seem much in a gallon, but again, if we go back to the context of a bucket full, 25 kilos, that starts to become a lot of material, and it starts to become a lot of weight. So weights and measurements will tell you. However, we can't only go by weights and measurements, because there are some formulations that have more sodium chloride than other things, and you have to buffer other things, which gives you that salinity with less salt, but there is no free lunch here, okay? You're gonna have to make that up somewhere else. Finally, is performance. This is a Porsche 911. It's not mine, but I wish I was. Performance is important. A salt has to perform, and you will see the performance. And we've been showing this down at the booth, and this is what's a lot of fun. We can, we've been showing the salt mixing in just a few minutes. It mixes clear. We're ready for salinity. We can do a whole battery of tests on that. But it's nice to be able to see something right in front of your eyes, and you don't have to believe any claims or anything like that. That's what we really love about this salt. Even our label is very, very simple. We want you to focus on the important things, and we want you to prove the other things to yourself. We don't want you to take our word for it, and that's what we should be doing with every single product in this hobby. And we're big with that with all of our products. Any questions, find the answers out yourself with the products, and then you don't even have to ever wonder, and every single product allows you to do that. So performance, you'll see it happen. Your mixing vats, don't have to clean them. Your pumps are clean. We don't get those problems with a pure anhydrous salt. But let's stay on this Porsche 911 here for a minute. I kind of look at a Porsche 911, this is a high performance engine, okay? And I think reef tanks are a high performance engine. So with a high performance engine, we don't want to use regular unleaded. We want to use premium unleaded. And at the end of the day, with all things considered, you're going to end up with that high quality fuel that you need to run on your tank with that consistent alkalinity that holds, and the overall bioavailability of everything that you're dealing with. It all makes it into the mix because we don't have anything in that moisture that's disrupting the mix, causing problems, creating barriers, residues and dropouts and all of these things, long mixing times. These are all the things we deal with that we don't have to deal with anymore. So this is a great step up for salt in general, for the whole hobby. So with Hot Salt Reef, it's absolutely pure. If you don't want to mess with any of those other things, there is a solution to that. And we're extremely proud of this product. Does anybody have any questions? That pretty much sums it up. If anybody has any questions, I can answer. Yes, sir.
Is there two different types of hot salt, one for reef and one for like fish only?
There's not. The question was, are there two types of hot salt, one for fish only, one for reef? There isn't. The nature of the anhydrous materials, pretty much with a fish only, it's pretty uptown for a fish only. Obviously when you're dealing, I'll just go back to the engine. If you have a Ford Focus, okay, nothing wrong with Ford Focus, but you don't need premium unleaded for it. It's kind of out of the, it economically is out of the question. So, any questions at all?
What about trace elements?
Trace elements, which ones?
Well, like some people say, I like tropical marine versus over just typical reef salt from, say, Marine Man. I'm just saying, what trace elements, are you adding anything, or is it just the salt itself?
Oh no, yeah, this is all going to be in line with natural seawater. So, and this is usually the part of the show where we want to compare this to a natural seawater. And this is one of the things, we spent a long time on this label, and we spent a long time on how we want to communicate this. And one of the things that we wanted to take the focus off of is a lot of numbers. We get dazzled by numbers, and the numbers are easy. Really, a lot of these numbers shake out when the majors are put together. When you add a salt, we're not adding 85 things to a salt. Nobody's doing that. That's just not how it runs. But what I always say to that is whatever trace element that's important to you, that you can even test or you're willing to test, if you're not willing to test it yourself, I really don't even, why does it even need to be on there, okay? If you do want to test it yourself, test it. Please do, because that's going to tell you everything you need to know, and you should vet every single number of the salt with every number that's important to you. So that's why we want to keep this focused on the anhydrous part of this, just for this, so you understand completely everything that's happening with the way it mixes in and what your end product is. So what I would say is everything is right there in line with reef natural seawater. And the beautiful thing, you're targeted, you're going to get the consistent parameters every single time. Not having to wonder, and peace of mind is everything. So, does that answer your question? Good enough? Okay. Anybody else? Okay.
How difficult is it to store the salt?
Hot salt stores very well, actually, because the materials inside are so consistent. It stores a long time. So even are you asking before mix or after? Before, okay, yeah, it stores great. We can store it for long periods of time, even after you mix it. Even after you mix it, it'll store and it'll be fine. You're not going to notice any kind of dropouts or any funny business or anything unpredictable like that. It's pretty much, it's straight up. Good. All right. Well, if anybody has any questions as I'm walking out, feel free to ask, and make sure you come down to booth 382 if you've not seen a demonstration yet. I'll be happy to do that for you. We'll be more than happy to do that for you. So we're just doing them all day, so we can show it to you right there live. All right. Well, thank you all for coming.